Okay, so I'm gonna allow a few minutes to figure out whether we can get the chief to join us.
Promote to map, promote to panelist. There. Yeah.
Can you convert her?
Yeah, it's happening.
Thanks.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Angie.
Hi.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, it's tricky. Okay, good. We're all here. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Any conflict of interest? See any approval of the agenda for today? Moved by Brian, seconded by Jared. All in favor? Perfect. Adoption of the minutes from our last two meetings, one on March 12th and one on April 1st. Moved by, somebody's going to adopt that, please. I'm begging you. Oh, right on, Jeff and Christian is seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Sorry, I have to toggle between all the faces. Motion to receive communications. Brian and Christian, right on. All right, let's get going. So we have many things in from the Attorney General. Solicitor General, sorry. Okay. The first one, if you are scrolling through the package electronically, is on page 13. It is letting us know about a new 5-year program to combat human trafficking. Angie, do you have any comments about this?
we were made aware of this and we will be participating in this. It's yet to unfold, but it'll be, for us, it'll be an Eastern Ontario type participation. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Okay. The next is at page 16. It pertains to the new license plates. So they are being, as I understand it, they're being redesigned. The current blue ones that are problematic haven't been issued since March 4th, and then starting March 5th, they were going back to the white ones until those ones are all used up. And then hopefully the new ones will be online and start to be distributed. I guess that was March 16th. So we probably have new ones already in the community.
Correct. I've got nothing more to add on that.
Okay. Next is at page 20. It's letting us know that we have a new Assistant Deputy Minister, Public Safety Division and Public Safety Training Division, Rick Stubbings. So we welcome him.
Correct.
Page 22, basic constable training. These are the recruits that were at the OPC. And the memo just lets us know about all the steps that were taken to maintain their health and safety, and that they'll be under self-isolation, I guess, when they return. Is that right, Angie?
Yeah, so they have now returned. They left with a self-assessment to ensure they were all healthy when they left. They had a nurse also that was with every recruit as they left the OPC. These recruits are now with us, and they're starting their training here now with us as we speak.
Okay, great. Page 28, the ministry is letting us know that additional individuals have been designated to enforce provincial offenses. That designation was made for the purpose of enforcing orders under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Angie, do you want to speak to how those issues are being dealt with locally?
Yes, so this allows bylaw officers as well as special constables to be able to participate in issuing tickets. But within our area, we are working hand in hand with bylaw and with public health in enforcing the orders. And as I've said before, we're taking very much a measured approach. So it's lots of education, lots of dialogue, lots of communications in that sense. Since all these measures have come into effect, including the City of Kingston's emergency proclamation, we've also we've had about 147 complaints about different areas. And again, we've attended, the majority of them we've attended. Public health is really going to be looking at the businesses, the business side of things, and we're going to be looking at anything that needs immediate attention, like persons that might be violating, going into the parks and on the playgrounds, those kinds of things, or having groups of more than 5 people. And in that sense, we've done lots of education, and we haven't laid any tickets at this point in time. People have been very considerate and are very mindful of what's happening in the pandemic and the necessity of having this. There's lots of questions in terms of the businesses and which businesses are deemed essential and which are non-essential. And I can say that we're taking a very measured approach with that, working very closely with public health, and Staff Sergeant Jody Armstrong and Sergeant Koopman are really taking the lead on this. And with the city, in terms of Brad Joyce, having very big open discussions when there is that gray area, and to ensure that that if they are to remain open, that they follow all the measures that are required in terms of social distancing and taking all the necessary measures. So we're working very hard to try and allow businesses that are deemed non-essential to have creative ways of keeping on doing their business.
Okay. Any questions or comments around enforcement at this time, Christian?
Is there, in terms of enforcement around parks and so forth, since I understand that bylaw, based on the authorities here, can also enforce, is there a coordination between police and bylaw on this? I just asked this as a result of a secondhand information of someone apparently being issued an $800 ticket for sitting in a park, but by bylaw officers. And so I'm wondering whether bylaw is not trained the way police in terms of exercising discretion in public education. And
are you
so,
talking Kingston? Because we haven't issued any tickets in Kingston.
right. So I'm just wondering what sort of coordination is between different agencies that can issue a ticket to make sure that people show appropriate discretion, or whether basically you're saying since no tickets have been issued, you don't think this is a problem and that everybody's, including bylaw, is showing the appropriate discretion.
We are working together hand in hand in terms of this. The calls are being dispatched through us to bylaw. We've trained together, we've spoken together about our measured approach. If we are to lay a ticket, if we were to do that, we would really have a consultation on that matter. But at this point in time in Kingston, we are working very closely together to have the same message along with public health.
Okay.
In other jurisdictions, it might be different than what we're talking, but in Kingston, I'm talking about a very coordinated approach.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was the essence of my question.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next memo that we received. It's at page 35 of your materials. This is letting us know about the order requiring the closure of non-essential workplaces. I believe this memo is talking about the initial order, which we know was then followed by a second order.
Yes. And as I've spoken to that already, we are working very closely, like I say, with the city and with public health and with us and how we're enforcing that. So it's really discussions on whether there's those gray areas, whether they should be allowed to continue with their business. We ensure that there's those discussions with public health to come up with alternative ways, or ensure that they're abiding by different alternatives to make it worthy that they can stay open.
Okay.
And again, at this point, we have not laid any fines or anything like that.
Okay. Page 37. It's a notice letting us know that access is being limited to the courthouses. This is to further the social distancing, and really it's telling us that people should only be going to the courthouses where it's really necessary. So urgent criminal or family, or urgent filing of court documents if you can't do that electronically. And attached to that memo are some of the signs and information that are being posted at the courthouses. That's correct. And I really don't have anything else to add on that. It hasn't, other than the fact that the court has been changed the way it does business. This memo hasn't impacted us.
Yeah. Okay.
Next, at page 42, letting us know about the order that was made about prohibiting organized public events of more than 5 people. So that's been in place for 2 weeks now, 2-ish weeks.
So this one just basically changed to where what used to be 50, now it's down to 5. And again, the measured approach is again that we're all taking. We're looking at the education. We're looking at the dialogue before we're laying tickets.
Yeah. Okay. Page 44. There's a fact sheet about expired N95 masks. So as I'm sure you're aware, there's a concern that we're going to run out of PPE, especially for frontline health workers. So this memo is just a request that where individuals or organizations have expired N95 masks to not dispose of them because they are still likely usable. Angie?
Yes, so we have the N95 masks that we have had from a long time ago when the SARS situation was happening. And so those were not disposed of. And when we had no other masks available to us, like the surgical masks, we were utilizing these N95 masks, and they were acting as surgical masks. So at this point in time, we have now received surgical masks. So we're now transitioning everything that we're using as surgical masks. And we're passing on these N95 masks to those that do need them.
I think that's great. I'm really glad that that was able to be worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Page 50. An update on the extension of the expiry date for driver, vehicle, and carrier products and services. So you remember our last meeting, we were told that like driver's license stickers, those types of things weren't going to expire and that they were going to be extended. And this memo is just further to that initial information piece.
Yeah, I really don't have anything else to add to that.
Okay. Next, page 56.
I have a question on that.
Oh, yes, Jeff. Sorry.
Thank you. I noticed in the report that it said only from March 1st. I assume that there's very few people, but it's possible that there's a lot who may have expired just prior to that, say in February, that didn't get it done because they may have been in self-quarantine or self-isolation, having traveled from China. So I know that when I came back into Canada in mid-February, we were advised to do that if we had traveled to China. Is it only for people who, like, I'm curious, if somebody who has an expired license, say from February 25th or something, gets stopped, are they going to be charged?
Well, isn't that a nice question? Well, as I'm reading it, it looks like it says to the extent that if it would have expired on or after March 1st, 2020, that's when they're allowing it to be expired until further notice, until this, obviously there's the epidemic or all these provisions are ended until further notice. So I would expect that there would be some discussions on that with I mean, there's discretion that's allowed in these areas, and if there's evidence to show that that they were in quarantine and weren't able to attend or to do it online, whatever the case may be, I think there would be discretion that would be imposed. So there would be some discussion there, because there's always a discretion whether to lay a ticket or not. So that's how I would look at that. Chris, do you have anything else that you'd want to say on that?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Chief, that you know, the officers have the discretion, and certainly if an officer did lay the charge, that's something that the person could bring up to the justice at that time, extenuating circumstances. So I think it's just a matter of they had to pick an appropriate date based on the health information that they had, and then if there's any outliers, then that would have to be dealt with or one off through the courts. And I I believe the officers are using their discretion a great deal, given the challenges we're facing right now.
Anybody else? Okay. Page 56. Oh, right, okay. This is an order that requires individuals to provide identifying information to provincial offenses officers in the event that that provincial offenses officer is considering issuing a ticket for violation of any of these orders that have been put in place.
Yeah, this was something that the OACP had lobbied for, because when this all came out, the one lacking enforcement piece was that it didn't allow anything to happen if the person failed to identify themselves, like it would under the Highway Traffic Act, under the Liquor License Act. So as a result, this order was put in place to ensure that if you were investigating and you had grounds to charge somebody under the EMCPA, that they would have to identify themselves. And of course, if they didn't, then you would also have the criminal code authority of arrest under obstructing a peace officer, and then they would identify through that. I mean, that would be the course of action in this case. So they've allowed that to now be part of the emergency order.
Okay. So I don't see any questions about that. So moving on, we're at page 59 now. Oh, this is expanding powers for MTO officers so that they can help with traffic direction and emergency parking in response to COVID-19.
Yeah, so it allows now MTO officers as well as maintenance staff to have been granted the ability to direct traffic, to help the police in terms of directing traffic. And it also allows them to close highways and use not to have to use specific equipment that would normally be used, but to be able to use equipment that would allow the traffic to continue to flow. So, so this is really expanding the powers of the MTO, and it allows extra support for the police so that they don't have to use their capacity to do those kinds of things like directing traffic and having to move barriers for closing the road.
Okay. Next up, page 65. Talking about the mandatory isolation orders for people who have been traveling. They need to self-isolate for 14 days. We talked about this last meeting. Any additional comments about that? Christian?
Can the chief, or is the chief able to comment on any data sharing issues in regards to the prospects of possible enforcement measures, given that the data necessary is collected by federal entities, and those would subsequently need to be shared with the necessary provincial entities? Any comment that you're able to make, Chief, in that regard? If not, that's okay as well.
Yeah, so what's happening now in terms of the to enforce quarantines, the OPP are now in the process of ironing out what that looks like. So they're getting the names of persons that need to be checked on through quarantines. And right now in Ontario, they are checking on those people, even if they're in our jurisdiction or others, just to kind of smooth out what that process might look like. So probably by the end of the week, we'll know what that's going to look like, and then it'll be our responsibility to get those names and to check on the people to ensure that they're quarantining the way they're supposed to be quarantining. So I have, at this point, I have every faith that that information is going to be passed on the way it should be, because now they've got the process in place.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Page 76. This is the updated emergency orders. So we've looked at most of this again. This memo may include the second order around closure of non-essential workplaces. But I'm assuming everybody is familiar by now about the emergency orders that have been made and that are being enforced.
Yeah, this is basically the extension of these orders until April 13th, but now we know that it's also, there's been an additional 28 days that have been granted, so now it's going to May the 12th. And the other thing that this is it talks about is that now we've got childcare centers for law enforcement and frontline workers that are available to them during this time frame. And we have a number, I think 3 different places in Kingston that are available for childcare purposes under these orders.
That's good. 79. This is clarification about the extension of the 6-day requirement to register a vehicle in Ontario.
So in this particular case, I think they were clarifying that this regulation will be revoked once the province is able to restore its regular services. So right now, when somebody has bought a used vehicle and they're needing to put plates on it and they have to put their new address on it, that 6-day term is going to be in limbo until all these different orders are revoked. So it's just putting an end date to it. It's going to happen once everything's revoked. Then you're going to have to go and legitimately register your address to the plates and all the other things that you need to do. Get the safety standards certificate completion on your vehicle. Those kinds of things. It's putting an end date to it.
Okay. 82. There was an order made that allows police services to obtain COVID-19 status information from, for example, our local medical officer of health or laboratories, so that the police know what the outcome of individual testing has been. Angie?
Yeah, so what has happened now is that the province has developed, the ministry has developed a web portal that will be populated by the ministry that has the results of which are people that are tested positive, so that our communication centers and only persons in our communication center for the protection of the officers who are responding to a call can determine whether someone has tested positive. It's very specific. It's very limited use, and it has just started actually this week for us. So it was last week. We were informed on Friday that we needed to provide information as to who had access to it. These members that are in our communicators would then have special access to this portal and had a sign-in authority to get into that portal. That's just happened this week, so we're just up and running now. We haven't used it at this point in time. But we're becoming familiar with it. Like I say, it's a very much very mindful of the privacy nature of this information.
Questions from anybody about that? Okay. 96. Basic constable training that was supposed to start on May 6th is not proceeding, and it's going to be deferred to a later date.
We're still working on that with the ministry and the Ontario Police College through the Ontario Chiefs of Police, as well as an oversight education and training working group in terms of finding different methods of how we can maybe have a deferred class maybe near the end of June. So we're working very hard collaboratively with them to see if there's different mechanisms that can be used in terms of online learning, or even having legislation changed to allow us to hold the courses in different municipalities that have the ability to train in terms of like larger police agencies. So that work is being done, and we're hopeful that we'll still be able to have an intake this spring. It's just when that's going to happen. So I said we're working very hard on that.
Okay.
It impacts a lot of agencies, of course, as you know, and there's lots of attrition. So we can't really afford to not have a spring class and then have one in the fall that has to double it up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just, it's a wait and see, I guess, like a lot of other things.
Yeah.
97.
I have a question on that.
Oh, sorry, I did not see you. Who is that?
Jeff,
Oh, Jeff, hi. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry. Is this going to make a major budget effect if we were talking about hiring some in June and then again in December, if I recall correctly? In the worst case scenario, we'll have fewer officers for a shorter period of time, or how is that going? Is that going to be a major problem for us?
Well, it will in staffing if we don't get to the numbers that we want. I mean, we're looking at having seven new recruits. We were looking at having 7 new recruits in the May intake, and so if that's deferred to September, and say we don't even get a September intake, then we're just going to have, everybody's going to be in the same boat. We're going to have attrition, and we're going to have not enough people to compensate for those that are retiring. So it'll have many effects on the budget. I mean, I guess you're not hiring the number of people to replace, but the worst case scenario is that you're going to be burning out your officers because you have less officers to replace the people that are retiring. So it is quite concerning if we don't have our classes.
Okay. Page 97. We're still in information from the Ministry of the Solicitor General. This one is asking individuals and organizations not to dispose of their used PPE, but instead to save it in case we need it.
Yeah, so we're working with Dr. Moore with the health unit to determine how we can best do that and to preserve them until they are able to be cleaned, whatever that process might look like.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Page 100. This refers to the discussion we had a few minutes ago about the online lookup that the Kingston police have recently been involved in, so that the dispatchers can obtain COVID-19 status of individuals.
Correct. Nothing more to add on that.
So I'm now into CAPG. There was a call for nominations, or there is a call for nominations to the Board of Directors. So if anybody is interested in doing that, I'd welcome that. And that's for the term 2020 to 2022. The nominations form attached there. Annual general meeting, which was going to be held in August. And if I'm at page 116 now. That is an email letting us know that that conference that was supposed to be in August has been postponed until the fall now. OAPSB.
Oh, Madam Chair, there was one CAPG email in between.
Oh, was there?
The
It's very.
COBE award.
What is it, Donna?
It was another email dated the 11th of March. It was a call for nominations for the 2020 Email COBE Award for Excellence. In Police
Award.
Governance.
Yes, okay. Thank you for helping me there. So if anybody would like to nominate anybody for that award, turn your mind to that. Now I think I'm at OAPSB. I'm on page 117. There were some questions around the regional roundtable sessions that were held. And so the ministry is just explaining what's happening next. So what's happening next is that they're going to take all that information, develop some policy proposals, post-draft regulations, and then there will be another engagement process. Page 118, the Zone 2 AGM that was scheduled for April 24th has been canceled. And then as a result, so the next email talks about, okay, what are the consequences of that? The consequences are that because the AGM is canceled, there is no 2020 executive that can be chosen at the AGM. So they're going to do it sort of electronically by email, I think. And on that email that's at page 119, there is a list of members who are prepared to stand for election. So the next Zone 2 meeting is scheduled for mid to end of June, and a decision will be made by mid-May about whether that's going to go ahead. Questions about that? Okay, that sort of ends the communications portion of the meeting. There are no delegations, but we have 2 reports. The first is the quarterly statistical report. Angie, are you speaking to this?
Yeah, so I'll talk about starting with the crimes, the criminal end of things. So we're looking at comparison from January to March from the 2019 and January to March of 2020. And we'll notice that the crimes against persons have gone up slightly from 333 to 377. And then we're talking about the crimes against property that have gone up slightly as well. So to make some comment on that, in terms of the crimes against persons, we're really looking at the drivers that are causing that increase, and it's really looking at our assaults. So our assaults have gone up a bit from 2019. It's really that's driving it. We don't really see an increase necessarily in the domestic in terms of charges, domestic charges between the two, but we do look at the drivers in that in terms of the elder assaults. There's some domestics, but it's not any different from last year during that time frame, having looked at it. But we're also having more assaults with weapons, those kinds of things that tended to come out. In terms of our crimes against property, we've increased about 300 from last year. Sorry.
Yeah.
In terms of our crimes against property, in terms of the drivers that are in that, it's our break and enters and our other thefts that have been driving that increase. And yes, about 300 that have increased. Sorry. In terms of the break and enters, we've had some commercial break-ins that have been increasing, but really in thefts, we're having shoplifts and theft from motor vehicles that seem to be the drivers that are increasing in that area. Frauds again have increased, but again, there's been some exploitation because of the COVID pandemic that have caused some different kinds of frauds occurring as a result of that, but we're still getting the same kinds of things with the CRA scams, the phishing, distraction thefts, grandparent emergency scams, identity thefts, that kind of thing. In terms of mischiefs, that's another one that's increased a bit. And we've had a rash of some attempts on parking meters, and we've had a number of damages to, whether it's damages to property, whether they've also been attempted break-ins, that could potentially be that, but definitely there's been a mischief increase as well. Our calls for service have increased about 1,000 from last year. What really encompasses our calls for service, and that isn't really captured in the criminal responses that we have, are things like abandoned 911 calls. In other words, sometimes it's a pocket dial or a call that comes in that comes in and is hung up quickly just before we are able to answer them. So we've had about 1,600 of those in that 3-month period. But we also we're responding to domestics where charges aren't laid, where it's verbal only. So that's not captured in the quarterly statistics, but it is the calls for service that we're having. The undesirable calls for service, suspicious activities, sudden deaths, mental health calls, assisting ambulance, alarms, and of course the change now is enforcing the EMCPA. So there's additional calls for service with that. So we're changing a little bit in the direction of things that we're responding to. But that's how I can comment on what's happening there. I can say that we've done some analysis on our 911 calls. And in our 911 calls, Inspector Begbie through Sergeant Melvin looked at some comparisons for 2019 and 2020. And so there's been an increase in monthly calls from January, February, and March. So in January 2019, we had about 4,200 911 calls. In January of 2020, we've had 4,900 911 calls. February in 2019, we've had 4,065, whereas in February 2020, 4,645. In March of 2019, we had 4,400. And in March of 2020, we've had 4,600, so an increase of about 6.1% in that month. So we are getting an overall increase of about 12% in our 911 calls for service in total. Or sorry, 6% in the last one in March. Our CAD calls that our officers are responding to, we've had an increase in those calls, as you've seen, in calls for service at 11,231. So overall, we are remaining very busy. I think with the pandemic, we're seeing some slight changes. It's hard to know what those changes mean at this point in time, or over the long haul, what those changes are going to look like, but we're looking at trends and keeping an eye on that.
Questions from anybody? No? Okay.
In terms of use of force, so let me look here. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, so our use of force statistics for January to March of 2020. So this report refers to 9 incidents that occurred in the last 3 months. And I'll notice that one incident involved a team report by the emergency response unit. So that's one report where multiple officers have put in a report, and with 4 additional officers filing a report. And that example is of this team report involved the emergency response unit and our drug unit. And they executed a drug search warrant, and firearms were drawn upon entry to this, and upon entry, two males had fled and left through the window, and there was a brief canine tracking, and the 2 males were apprehended shortly thereafter. But during that whole incident, there was a CEW that was deployed, numerous firearms were pointed as a result of the emergency response unit and the drug unit entering, and of course at the gunpoint arrest based on the behavior and of the individuals. So that covers quite a few displays that have happened when you're looking at the documentation of the firearms displayed and firearms pointed. But I can give you some examples then of where firearms had been drawn, so that you kind of get the severity of things that have been happening. So, for example, the police attended for a report of a male smashing property. Upon arrival, the male was brandishing a golf club, that he was holding it like a bat. And in that sense, the police drew their firearm and challenged the male to drop the bat, which he did, and he was arrested without incident. So that's an example of another firearms pointed. Police attended a call for a male brandishing a knife. Upon arrival, the male hid in the residence. Upon locating the male, he was arrested at gunpoint for officer safety. Knife found concealed on his person. No injuries involved. We have another example of a man observed in a fast food restaurant with a handgun. Upon arrival, police arrested at gunpoint. The male ended up having a BB gun. Multiple 911 calls for a vehicle being driven dangerously, hopping sidewalks and driving around other vehicles. The car was located and failed to stop for police. Short pursuit was promptly discontinued, but the vehicle was later found by an officer on his own. Handgun was drawn for officer safety and arrested. Finally, police were called for a male in a bank vestibule, possibly armed with a knife. And again, police arrived, and the handgun was gone with commands given to obey, and he was taken into custody without any injuries. So those are examples of the firearms that were that were drawn and pointed. An example of the discharge, there was only one, was an injured deer. And just one side of a comparison for 2019, during that same time period, there were 19 incidents. So we've reduced that this year during this time frame where we had 9.
Okay.
And that's everything.
Angie, I have a question. So I think it's somewhat unusual to have the firearm numbers higher than the CEW numbers, but is that because the firearm numbers are representing one incident with multiple officers?
That's right. That one was not that drug warrant that occupied so much of it, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I explained that to you.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got a team going in as well, but you also have additional officers that are also attending that site. The team report is one thing, but you also had 4 additional officers that were going through that.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Thank you. St. Patty's Day, Chris?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. You have the report in front of you. Bit of an unusual year this year, to say the least. You know, we're leading up to it. We have St. Patrick's Day following on to Tuesday. Best intelligence we were receiving around the schools was expect parties on the Friday night, large-scale parties on the Saturday and on the Tuesday. So we redeployed personnel throughout the department to minimize costs incurred. And of course, as the event unfolded that week, we had the COVID-19 health issue arise. Very pleased that our partners in the community, specifically Queen's University administration, were out in front of this with public health, you know, encouraging students not to participate. So as such, we kept our plan in place and then shifted officers to other duties and cut the officers, any officers that would have been on overtime as soon as possible. So the enforcement numbers were down substantially with 21 summonses issued. Again, the University District Safety Initiative and nuisance party bylaws remain very, very effective tools for us. You'll see on page 2 where our total costs we incurred were over above regular staffing costs were $5,294, which is plus additional costs of operating supplies, bringing us to a total of $6,527. This is substantially lower than the $39,564 from last year and over 50,000 in 2018. So while I would not be taking this as what 2021 will look like, because hopefully we don't have COVID, and hopefully it would be nice if we don't have any other extenuating circumstances and we're able to keep the costs where they were this year. But I think that might be overly optimistic. But I think overall, between the nuisance party bylaw, the University District Safety Initiative, and the staffing plans that we're putting in place, that things are trending in the right direction, both in costs and enforcement.
Questions from anybody? No? Okay. One motion. It's to, I'm remembering it off the top of my head, but I think it's to allow me to sign the agreement so that we can get $96,647 in for the bail safety pilot program. Somebody, moved by Christian, seconded by Jeff. All in favor? Thank you, people. Unfinished, there's one item of unfinished business.
Yes, the resignation of Sean Bao.
No, I'm not there yet.
Oh, sorry.
But I'll get there. I'm just scrolling through this agreement. It's very, 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 very long. It's the cancellation of the OAPSB annual general meeting. But I can't get there yet. Hang on. Hang on. Page 164. All right, so the OAPSB meeting was going to be in April. But now they're still going to have it, but it's going to be conducted virtually. The problem is when they do it virtually, they don't have people attending and paying registration fees and everything else. So they're going to fall short of the annual funding goals, even though they've already prepaid some of the conference expenses. So they're asking for sponsorship of the virtual AGM. I believe that normally we do sponsor the real life AGM. Donna?
Yes, and at the previous meeting, we approved sponsoring that, but then, of course, it was canceled. So we just wanted confirmation that the board would still want to go ahead and sponsor for $500 for the virtual meeting to help defray some of the costs we've already encountered.
What do folks want to do?
We had already budgeted this, is that correct?
Yes, yes, we've continued to contribute $500 towards these conferences for the past number of years.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, so moved by Jeff to leave that sponsorship in place. Any seconders? Christian? Any more discussion? I don't see any. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Now we get to, as I turn the page, new business. We have a resignation.
Yes, Sean Bao. Sean Bao is retiring or resigning/retirement after 29 years with the Kingston Police. Sean was hired as a cadet in July 1991 after his graduation with distinction from St. Lawrence College in the Law and Security Administration program, now commonly referred to as Police Foundations. He also received the St. Lawrence College Academic Council Award for having the highest academic proficiency in his graduating class. Early in his career, Sean was praised by several members of the public and the local Victim Witness Assistance Program for his compassion, understanding, and dealing with some very sensitive situations. In one instance, a victim relayed that Sean had helped to turn a traumatic situation into a tolerable one that had an end in sight. In January 2001, Sean was transferred from frontline patrol duties to criminal investigations and was one of our earliest officers to be assigned to the newly emerging area of cyber crimes and internet child pornography, which has exploded, unfortunately, in recent years. As an investigator, Sean's caring manner continued to be recognized, as one victim remarked that Sean had the ideal mix of professionalism and compassion necessary for the important work in which he was involved. From 2008 to 2011, Sean worked in the penitentiary squad, in which time he was recognized with the Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner's Commendation for outstanding investigation with respect to capturing a convicted murderer who had escaped custody. Sean returned to community patrol duties in 2012, where he was an excellent mentor for junior officers on his platoon, and during that same year, he was awarded the Police Exemplary Service Medal. In 2014, Sean returned to criminal investigations, where he quickly became a mentor to the numerous officers who were adjusting to their new roles as detectives. He also received positive feedback from his sergeant, Pat Benoit, who indicated, and I quote, "Detective Bao is an asset to the unit. He is knowledgeable and dependable. He also has a great personality and a good sense of humor, which tends to relax the atmosphere of a unit during these tense moments. He works hard and has a real desire to catch the bad guys." In reviewing Sean's file, a consistent quality emerged, and that of an officer who remained dedicated to victims as he did his best to ensure they received compassionate justice. Sean's passion for policing allowed him to serve in many capacities during his tenure with the Kingston Police. He completed his exceptional service in the community patrol area. We thank Sean for his 29 years of service and wish him all the best in his future endeavors.
Thank you. Donna, could we send a little note from the board, please, thanking him?
Yep, sure.
Thank you. Those are all of the items on our agenda. So motion to move in camera, moved by Christian, seconded by Jeff. All in favor? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.